Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon. So in the previous lesson, we have learned about the female reproductive system. Of course, we learned about male reproductive system, but who cares about it? It doesn't have the interesting menstrual cycle, which is more importantly inside your O-level syllabus. And this is what we are going to learn in this lesson. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to appreciate why your girlfriend, your wife, or your mom have some PMS. Nah, just kidding. Instead, you will learn about the different stages of the menstrual cycle, the fertile and infertile phases. And this is quite important if you do not want to get your girlfriend or wife pregnant. Or rather, is quite important for family planning. And last but not least, the role of estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone are hormones. And hormones, as we have discussed, actually affect a person's mood. And a while ago, I mentioned about PMS. Those are the hormones that result in PMS. But just take note, if you read your textbook, you will find two other hormones on top of estrogen and progesterone. But those two hormones are not in your O-level syllabus, as you can see down here. So don't worry about them. Just focus on these two. Another thing to take note is inside your textbook, the hormone estrogen is spelled as OESTROGEN instead of ESTROGEN. I'm using this spelling because this is the spelling that comes out in your O-level. First, let us take a closer look at the ovary. Just take note, some of the information in this slide is more for your information. Not necessary that you copy anything on this slide down. Information that you will need for your O-level syllabus, I will include them in the other slides. So it's not necessary that you copy anything on this slide down. As mentioned in the previous lesson, females are born with all the egg cells they have in their life. And during every cycle, one of the cells will start to mature, and the maturing egg will secrete the hormone estrogen. So what this hormone will do is it will help the uterine lining of the ovary to grow. Uterine lining is basically just blood vessel, which is why during the end of the cycle, the female will bleed because those blood vessels will disintegrate and blood will come out through the vagina. And high level of this hormone estrogen is needed for ovulation. Ovulation is basically the release of the egg cell from the ovary. But just take note, in the diagram, the egg is sort of ripped off from a side of the ovary. But in actual fact, it just bursts out because this is a 2D diagram instead of 3D diagram. So it's a bit difficult for me to pop the egg out. So I will just represent it as it being ripped open from a side of the ovary. So after ovulation, the site whereby the egg is released, it will become something known as coprolutums, which will secrete the hormone progesterone. So this progesterone is important for lowering the level of estrogen as well as to continue to make the uterine lining thicker. Basically, what I want you to take away from this slide is ovary is secreting the hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Before ovulation, it is mostly estrogen. After ovulation, it is mostly progesterone. There is still a high level of estrogen after ovulation, but not as high as before. And coprolutums is formed after the egg is released from the ovary. So these are the few things to take note from this slide. Now let us take a more detailed look at the menstrual cycle. From day 1 to day 5 is the menstruation period, whereby the uterine lining will start to break down. And this is when the female will experience bleeding out from their vagina. As mentioned, the wall of the uterus are just blood vessels. So when they break down, blood will come out. After day 5, the uterine lining will start to repair itself. This is triggered by the hormone estrogen, and high level of estrogen is needed for ovulation. So after menstruation, ovary will start to increase the secretion of estrogen. And the level of estrogen will reach its peak at around day 14, whereby ovulation will take place. After ovulation, corpus luteum will secrete progesterone, and progesterone will decrease the level of estrogen. So after ovulation, the egg will travel to the oviduct or the fallopian tube to await fertilization. From day 11 to day 16 is what we call the fertile period, because this is the duration whereby there's high chance of the female getting pregnant if she were to copulate. Regardless of whether fertilization takes place, from day 17 to day 28, the uterine lining will continue to thicken, and this maintenance of the uterine lining is caused by progesterone. And on top of maintaining the uterine lining, progesterone also prevents further maturation of egg. So progesterone is exerting some form of negative feedback to the level of estrogen. Remember earlier on we mentioned that high level of estrogen is needed for ovulation. Why progesterone needs to prevent? Because it is really not wise to have too many eggs maturing at one go. Imagine a human female having to carry 6 or 7 children. It is biologically and physically challenging for a female to do that. And it will definitely put the mother's life at risk if this were to happen. In scenario whereby there's no fertilization, at the end of day 16, the egg would have disintegrated or broken down. And the level of progesterone will start to decrease from day 22 onward. And this decrease in level of progesterone together with the decrease in level of estrogen will cause menstruation to occur in the next cycle. So this is a typical 28-day cycle of your O-level syllabus. But bear in mind, in actual females, most of them will have different cycle. That means some of them might have 30, some of them might have 26-day cycle, some of them will have irregular cycle. But O-level being O-level, we standardize everything so you will not have to second guess how many days is the cycle or which day does ovulation takes place. For all intents and purposes, your O-level paper, the menstruation will be a 28-day cycle and ovulation will normally occur on the 14th day. But in actual fact, it is different. So if you are planning to do some family planning, just bear in mind that you need to monitor the cycle yourself instead of relying on this 28-day cycle chart. Next, this slide will help you to understand the effect of estrogen and progesterone. For your O-level paper, you might see the graph showing the level of estrogen and progesterone, how they change throughout the menstrual cycle. First is the level of estrogen, whereby it will start to increase followed by a decrease. Then is progesterone, whereby at the start it is low level, followed by an increase, then a decrease. So what is happening down here? I would recommend all of you to just memorize these two graphs instead of the effect of these two hormones, because by understanding the graph, the effect of this hormone will just come naturally. So for estrogen, it is there to repair the uterine lining, which is why the level will start to increase, causing the uterine lining to become thicker. High level will trigger ovulation. And because of ovulation, we have corpus luteum, which will secrete progesterone. And this is why the level of progesterone will start to increase after the peak of estrogen. The increase in progesterone will cause the decrease of estrogen to prevent further ovulation. And progesterone is there to maintain the uterine lining. If the egg is not fertilized, the corpus luteum will also disintegrate, which will cause the progesterone level to decrease, and estrogen level will also decrease, and the decrease of these two hormones that helps to maintain the uterine lining will cause the uterine lining to break down because their level decrease. So menstruation will start and the cycle will repeat. Finally, let us learn when is the fertile and infertile period and why those days are the fertile and infertile period. The fertile period is between day 11 to day 16. Why is this period the fertile period? Because ovulation normally occurs on the 14th day of a 28 days cycle. An egg can survive 1 to 2 days. So 14, 15, and 16, the egg can survive. On the other hand, the sperm can survive 3 to 4 days. So 14, 13, 12, and 11, the sperm can survive that long to wait for ovulation to take place. And this is why day 11 to day 16 is the fertile period. Because if a woman have intercourse on day 11 of her cycle, the sperm can swim to the oviduct, and since it can survive 3 to 4 days, after ovulation on day 14 and the egg get transported to the oviduct, the surviving sperm can still fertilize the egg. On the other hand, if the women have intercourse on day 16, the egg is still alive for the sperm to fertilize it. The rest of the time is known as the infertile period. Before day 11, sperm do not survive long enough and the uterus lining is too thin. So even if fertilization takes place, the zygote cannot embed itself into the uterine lining because it is too thin. After day 16, the egg would have broken down or disintegrated. So any sperm that goes to the oviduct will not be able to find an egg to fertilize. So one of the common misconception is during menstruation, the egg will be discharged together with the blood, which is not true because by day 16, since the egg can only survive 2 days, it would have been broken down by then. But having said all of this, most women, their ovulation really doesn't occur on the 14 days. And not all women have a 28-day cycle. So having intercourse before 10 and after 16, there still might be chance of a women getting pregnant in actual life scenario. For your O-level scenario, the probability of getting pregnant will just get lower and lower as we go before day 11 and go after day 16. So this is the thing to take note. Your O-level syllabus is just giving you a rough idea. You do not have to remember 32-day cycle, 25-day cycle, and so on. We just fix at 1. In your actual life practice, when you are having family planning, you do need to track how many days is the cycle and also look out for day of ovulation. Normally, there will be some spike in the body temperature during ovulation. So that is all for the menstrual cycle.